Hey guys, Nick from ArchCityPLO.com and Arch City Poker. Apologies for not posting a video last week. I don't believe I did. Was kind of busy. Actually got married over that weekend, so didn't really have as much time for poker. But back this week, and in this week's video, we're going to talk about when to lead out with a monster hand or the top of your range, maybe when to c-bet as well. I had this question asked from a player that I know very well and that I play with, and so I wanted to address this because I do think it's I think it's a spot or like a situation where a lot of players, I think a lot of you guys maybe don't know when to slow play or if you should just be betting out with these monsters. There are a couple factors that I can help out with, and these aren't going to be, every factor possible, I guess, because these videos are a little shorter. But I think there are some main ones that I can help out or help you realize. So the first is, simply put, range advantage. If you have a big range advantage, you probably should be betting a lot anyways, right? Like, and if there's any need or any need to balance what you're doing, if it is against a thinking player, then if you're gonna bluff a good amount in that spot because you're betting more often with your range due to your advantage, you should be betting the top of your range as well. Now, if you're playing against a call station, a really fishy player, you probably just want to bet in general, not really worry too much about range advantage or anything like that. But as far as when to maybe slow play, I would say it's when you block more of your opponent's continues, like more of your opponent's range that is most likely to pay off over three streets. So an example of this would be on, let's say you are the pre-flop aggressor. Flop is ace 8-4. Maybe it's rainbow, whatever. Ace 8-4 rainbow, and you flop top set. It's going to be really hard to get three streets of value with that hand. Yes, it's the best hand you can have. It deserves to play for stacks. But if you think about it, if you block your opponent's top pair hands so hard, if they're stuck with a lot of, the type of hands that are going to continue that spot are going to be a lot of like your under pairs, a lot of under pocket pairs, maybe some 8x. They might have some straight draws every now and then, but you might get a street or two of value. You might be better off inducing. The hand's not vulnerable and it blocks too much. So top set in that spot probably wants to actually check quite a bit. And if it's a board now on these ace high textures, guys, if you are going with like 100% c-bet strategy with your range, which I do a lot in that spot, I'll bet like quarter pot, then you just want to go ahead and bet with that hand. But if you're somebody that doesn't mix your strategies, if you like betting half pot, 2/3 pot in that spot, I'm not saying that's wrong. I do think it's wrong theoretically, but it's not going to be a losing play to do so. If you're trying to simplify your game by having just one size and you like betting a little bit larger, polarizing your range if you're going to do that, meaning that there's some stuff in the middle you won't bet, like pocket kings, for example, you're probably going to want to include top set because of how much you block. And you will be able to end up getting 1 to 2 streets a little bit easier, I think, on the turn and river. You might be able to induce your opponent if they are a little more aggressive. I think that's something else to keep in mind, what type of opponent is in the hand with you. The point is, let's say you have ace king, though. That leaves a little more wiggle room for your opponent to have an ace x hand that you could stack. I would look to bet ace king and even ace queen at 100% frequency, no matter what you choose to do on the flop as far as your sizing, and then look to bet that over 3 streets against most opponents in your low stakes games or your live low to mid stakes games. But if you do have top set, it could be blocking a little too much. It can almost be too strong at that point. So that's something to keep in mind. Going back to range advantage a little bit as well, this is for if you are facing a thinking player. Let's say he raises in middle position and you decide to call in the big blind and you have pocket sevens and the flop comes 7-6-4, for example. Your opponent, his range should not hit those lighter textures hard enough often enough. Whereas in the big blind, you're going to likely have a little bit of a polarity advantage because you're not only going to have all those pairs, you're going to have all the 2 pairs, you're going to have all the straights that he can't have. So at that point, I would look to lead out with some bluffs, like bluffs or semi-bluffs. I would attack certain opponents actually with air in that spot. And if I'm going to do that, you're going to want to lead for value too, because the other part of this is that board probably gets checked back a lot by your opponent. He doesn't want to face a check raise when he has a lot of his 1 pair hands in his range. So if it's an opponent that you think is a thinker that is willing to play pretty balanced and check back in spots like that, you're going to want to lead out with your monsters. You're going to want to balance that with your bluffs as well. Now, let's change the opponent, and let's say that he is, I would say, a little more fishy, or not as, I guess, like, competent, as far as he's probably one of those guys that maybe he just thinks because he's the pre-flop aggressor, he should just c-bet no matter what. Against that guy, I would check and either check call to slow play or check raise. I don't think I would lead out as often there, because then we're going to take away their ability to over c-bet. That's how we exploit them, is by letting them over c-bet on a board that they don't really have that strong of a hand on that often, and then we can attack them with check raises. Another spot in general that I think you should do a lot of leading, perhaps at the top of your range. This goes specifically for live low-stakes games, and then I would say the micro to low-stakes online games where you especially know the population is a little bit softer. If the flop has 4 to 5 players on it, like if you have 4 to 5 guys seeing the flop or whatever, if it's the kind of board that gets checked back a lot, like a paired texture, or like one of those straight completing textures, a flush completing texture, like monotone, all diamonds or whatever, I might look to lead in those spots if you don't feel like you need to worry about balance too much. Now, it's going to look pretty strong, but what you can do is you can size down a little bit and start to build a pot. So, like, let's say it does come Jack 5, 6, all diamonds, and you did defend out of the big blind or something. Might not be a terrible situation to start leading with some of your bigger flushes, just as an exploit, just to build the pot. Yes, in theory, should you probably not be leading there? Yes. And that's a good transition real quick into you guys that are, the last couple of videos I've had some pushback on some plays that were really exploitative. Guys, if I'm making a suggestion that seems really out of line, if it seems very exploitative based, it's from experience. It's from understanding how to crush these populations. Yes, in theory, are some of the plays suggested not going to be the best? Yeah, but that's assuming that your opponents play optimal poker. That's the point of a solver, is it's helping you understand what is optimal and what to do to make yourself not exploitable against opponents who are balanced, who are tough. You guys that are watching this channel, your opponents are not going to be like that. You know this. So anything I suggest, if I don't specifically say so and you think it's out of line, go ahead and ask me and I'll provide some clarification, but it's pretty darn close to 100% likely that it's going to be an exploitive play. So end of that rant, back to when we should lead our monsters. Kind of to recap, I would say when you feel like you're when you are possibly a little more vulnerable, but mainly blocking not as much, that's those hands that are in the top third, getting close to the very top of your range, I would look to start betting those aggressively, especially if you have the range advantage. If you're not as vulnerable and you block a lot, like when you have top set specifically, if you have top 2 maybe on a pretty dry board, like a lot of those combos could be argued to be check in some spots. But generally, if you have the range advantage, you should be betting a lot anyways, and you should bet with those hands. Now, if we're talking about when you're not the pre-flop aggressor, when you should maybe lead out, one is if you have the polarity advantage. I gave that example where you're in the big blind on the lighter texture, leading into the player that opens maybe an earlier middle position. That's a good spot to lead some of your hands because there are a lot of checkbacks there. You're also justified to start betting, and even betting a little bit larger if you want in that spot. Another general situation where you can lead, if there's a lot of players seeing a flop in a low stakes game, you feel like they're not very competent, but you want to build a pot. They might make a lot of mistakes in the form of calling. Don't worry about checking to the pre-flop aggressor. I just would start building the pot right then and there. And you can start with smaller bets if you feel like it's going to look too strong if you start betting large and you can't really represent bluffs. So those are a few thoughts and or situations where I think you guys can go ahead and bet out with the very top of your range, or lead with your monsters if you're not the pre-flop aggressor. I always encourage any kind of feedback or comments if you guys got them. If you have another situation where maybe you think it's a good idea to lead, go ahead and share it in the comment section, and then I can reply to that, and I can give you my approval or confirmation. If I don't think it is, then I'll give you a reason why, and maybe it'll help you out. Maybe we'll just argue about it. It doesn't really matter, but I think these thoughts will help you out as far as when to lead your monsters, maybe when to check them some of the time. So if you guys get any questions or comments, like I said, let me know. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next video. Thanks.